I had just won $21 million and drove to my daughter's house to share the good news. But as I stood at her door, I heard her say, if we increase the dose, by Christmas she won't even remember who she is. I didn't knock. I drove home and started the silent game. Can you imagine the crushing weight of betrayal when the people you love most try to erase you? I had just won $21 million, a ticket to a new life, but outside my daughter's door, I overheard a plot so evil, it left me shattered. I stood there, holding that envelope, my hand trembling, as I heard my own daughter, Nora, coolly discussing with her husband, Jake, how to slowly increase my medication. If we up her dosage, she said, she'll forget who she is by Christmas. Just like that. My knees buckled. My heart didn't just break, it completely crumbled into dust. I didn't knock. I couldn't. Instead, I turned, drove home in a daze, and the first thing I did was install hidden cameras everywhere. A few days later, I started my performance. I played confused. I refused to sign papers they pushed in front of me. That's when my daughter, my own flesh and blood, slapped me across the face. Then Jake, my son-in-law, shoved me so hard I hit the floor. I was stunned, trembling, thinking I wouldn't get back up. But I did. And just as I struggled, the front door burst open. The police. Oh, they thought I was just an old woman, frail and soft. They had no idea they were about to witness the moment everything changed. They were about to learn what regret truly felt like. I stood there, frozen, the envelope clutched so tight my knuckles ached. $21 million. The weight of it pressed into my palm like a phantom heartbeat. I hadn't planned on giving them everything, not at all. Just a little something, you know. Help with their mortgage, maybe fix up their kitchen, start a college fund for Emily, my granddaughter. A good surprise, I thought. A loving gesture. But some surprises, darling, don't land where you hope. Their voices, so casual, so clear, cut through the door. Jake's first, chillingly calm. If we up her dosage slowly by Christmas, she won't remember who she is. And then Nora, my daughter, my own flesh and blood, chimed in, she won't fight back. She's soft now. This is the only way. Something inside me just folded. Not broke, no. Breaking implies there's still something left to fix, doesn't it? This was a tearing. Clean. Sharp. I couldn't knock. I couldn't face them. I just turned, drove home, and moved through the motions. No tears. No shaking. Just a cold, mechanical emptiness. That night, 2 packages arrived. A bottle of whiskey, which I had absolutely no intention of touching, and a set of hidden cameras. Those I fully intended to use. I installed them myself. One in the kitchen, aimed at the counter. One right by the front door. Another tucked discreetly into the molding above my medicine cabinet, where they couldn't possibly see it. I tested every angle, every shadow, every whisper of sound. You know, people always say that when you get older, you become invisible. And maybe that's true. But let me tell you, invisibility has its incredible uses. 3 nights later, they came, just like clockwork. Nora brought a casserole, playing the doting daughter. Jake flashed that smile, you know the one. The kind that never quite reaches the eyes. They acted like nothing was wrong. Small talk. Empty compliments. Emily, bless her heart, wasn't with them. Of course not. She still had a soul. After dinner, Jake, who'd never lifted a finger before, offered to help clean the kitchen. As I was rinsing dishes, I saw it. His eyes darted to the medicine cabinet. A pause. A hand slipped into his pocket. Just a second too long. Then, he left a new bottle of pills right there, where my old ones used to be. I didn't touch them. Not then. That night, under the cover of darkness, I swapped the capsules. They're poison. I tucked it safely away in a Ziploc bag under the sink. Proof. The very next morning, the show began. I forgot the sugar in my coffee. I called Emily by the cat's name. I stared blankly at the TV, even though it wasn't on. They came back, clutching a stack of papers. Jake, with false concern, said it was routine. Nora cooed that they were just helping take the burden off my shoulders. I smiled, I nodded, I told them I'd take a look. I wanted them to come back. I waited. 4 days later, they reappeared, and this time, the smiles were gone. Nora laid the papers on the table like she was dealing a deadly hand of cards. The first page. Long-term care authorization. The second. A property transfer. I blinked at the legal jargon, pretending to be utterly lost. I asked about Emily. I asked what day it was. That's when Jake's hand slammed down on the table, making me jump. Nora hissed something, a venomous whisper I couldn't even process. Then, a sharp, searing pain across my cheek. She'd slapped me. Before I could even catch my breath, Jake grabbed my shoulder, shoved me with all his might. My back slammed against the chair, pain exploding up my spine. My hands trembled. I looked up. And just like that, the front door burst open. Officer Grant. Laura. Little Laura, who used to take piano lessons from me when she was just 12. Now, she stood there, a badge on her hip, a gun at her side, and a look on her face that said she'd seen more than enough. Step away from her, she commanded, her voice firm. Nora went absolutely chalk white. Jake slowly raised his hands. And me? I just sat there, calm. Watching. For anyone still listening, still following this story, let me tell you this, sometimes, silence isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's preparation. And I, my dear, had been preparing for this exact moment since the day I didn't knock. They thought it was over. But darling, that was only the very first step. After the police left, after Nora and Jake were gone and the front door finally clicked shut, I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. I simply walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My cheek still burned, and my shoulder ached where I'd hit that chair. But I stood tall. Because now, the game had shifted. I didn't just want to defend myself anymore. Oh no. I wanted them exposed. The slap, the shove, those were emotional, born of the moment. I needed proof that their twisted plan went far beyond just one bad evening. I needed to peel back every single layer of what they were hiding. So, I got to work. My first call was to Martha. She's been my closest friend for over 30 years. We met at the library, me working part-time, her organizing a grief support group after losing her husband. Martha has this incredible mind that remembers everything, especially people. She's slow to judge, but she notices everything. And she never, ever liked Jake. I didn't tell her the whole gruesome story, not yet. I just said I had a situation and needed help reviewing some documents. Martha arrived 2 hours later, reading glasses perched on her nose, yellow notepad in hand. I pulled out that folder Nora had left behind. She was so arrogant, so confident I wouldn't read it. And that arrogance? It was going to be her absolute undoing. Page after page of dense legal jargon, durable medical proxy, permanent residence waiver. There was even a draft of a power of attorney that I had never, ever signed. But somehow, my signature was scanned right into it. Martha caught it instantly. She tapped her pen on the page. Harriet, she said, this isn't just pressure. This is premeditated. We read through everything, twice. Martha took photos of the documents with her phone, then helped me sort through what looked suspicious and what could be useful later. I didn't need to understand every single legal term. I just needed to build a solid chain, their intent, their motive, their method. Next, I tackled my banking records. I'd never given Nora full access to my accounts, but she'd helped me set up online banking years ago. I'd even given her my passwords when I broke my wrist, thinking I'd change them later. Or so I thought. When I logged in, everything looked fine at first, usual balances, scheduled payments. But then I checked the recent login activity. 3 access attempts in the past week from an unfamiliar device. And 1, clear as day, from Jake's work IP address. I immediately called the bank's fraud department. They confirmed my account had been viewed multiple times. No money was gone yet, but the pattern, darling, was crystal clear. I printed everything. Highlighted every suspicious access. Made copies. Organized it all into a meticulous binder, page by page. I wasn't angry anymore. I was methodical. Over the next 3 days, I dug through everything I owned. My insurance policies. The deed to my house. The old folder where I kept letters from my late husband. I was searching for fingerprints, traces, anything that showed how long this plot had been brewing. And I found it. Buried deep in my filing cabinet, in a folder innocently labeled Miscellaneous. It was a typed document, dated 6 months ago. A long-term care evaluation form, completely filled out, but not signed by me. It listed my name, my birthday, all these fake medical notes I'd never heard of, memory concerns, delayed response, inconsistent hygiene. All made up. All signed by a physician I'd never even met. I closed the folder. Sat still for a long, long time. They'd been planning this far, far before I won the lottery. This wasn't just about money. Not anymore. This was about erasing me. Turning me into some small, manageable version of myself, an old woman no one would believe, someone they could just shut away. I picked up the phone and made 3 calls. First, to Detective Grant. I told her I had more information. She said she'd be by in the morning. Second, I called Emily's school. Left a message for the guidance counselor, just to check in, just to make sure my granddaughter was safe, not caught in the crossfire. Third, I called an estate lawyer, one with a fierce reputation. I booked a meeting under my maiden name. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, watching the footage again. Jake reaching into his pocket, making the swap. Nora watching from the hallway, pretending not to see. Me, sipping water, buying time. I played it twice. Not because I needed proof anymore, but to remind myself that I hadn't imagined it. That the danger was real. That I was absolutely right to act. By morning, the ache in my shoulder had dulled. I brewed coffee, dressed carefully in navy slacks and a blouse with buttons that took just a little too long to fasten. I pinned my hair back, put on my late husband's watch. It still ticked, steady and quiet. I sat by the window and waited for the next knock on my door. Because this time, I would be ready. Detective Grant arrived just after 9, looking utterly professional in her plain slacks and gray blouse. No badge in sight. Her eyes swept across my porch, assessing everything. She didn't smile, she didn't need to. I led her straight to the kitchen. There, laid out in quiet, meticulous order, was my evidence, the forged care documents, the fraudulent login records from my bank account, and the video files, all backed up on a flash drive, meticulously labeled by date and time. She sat across from me, opened her own folder, but didn't take out a single sheet of paper. She just listened. When I finished walking her through the horrifying sequence of events, she finally spoke. Her voice was low, steady, chillingly clear. "This isn't just about family," she said. "This is fraud, identity tampering, quite possibly conspiracy to defraud a senior citizen." She didn't need to elaborate. I could see in her eyes that she'd seen this before. Maybe not with this much chilling precision, or this many moving parts, but the core of it. Oh, that was heartbreakingly familiar. She simply said, "Keep copies." I handed her the binder, the flash drive, the printed logs. She promised she'd loop in a financial crimes officer and start a formal review. She didn't give me a timeline. I didn't ask for one. After she left, I sank back into the silence of my kitchen. The air still held a faint trace of her scent, clean wool and paper. I could hear the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the soft tapping of tree branches against the living room window. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to simply be. Then, I stood and walked to my bedroom closet. Behind the winter coats, tucked away, was my safe. Inside, 2 things I hadn't touched in a very long time, the original deed to my house, in my name only, and that sealed envelope from the State Lottery Commission, dated 4 weeks prior. I held both for a moment, feeling their significance, before slipping them into my purse. Next, I drove to my lawyer's office, a modest red brick building on the edge of downtown, nestled between a dentist and a florist. The parking lot was empty, save for one silver sedan. I sat in my car for a moment, just breathing, steadying myself before stepping inside. His name was David Kessler. He'd handled my husband's will years ago and had recognized my voice instantly when I called. He met me in the waiting room with a simple nod, then motioned me into his office. No receptionist, no small talk. I liked that. Once the door was shut, I laid the deed and the lottery envelope on his desk. He opened the lottery envelope first. His eyes scanned the paper inside, and I watched his eyebrows slowly rise. I saw his eyes track across the numbers. Then, a profound silence settled in as he absorbed what I told him next. Not just the lottery. Not just the betrayal. The forged papers. The login attempts. The physical aggression. He didn't say a word for a long, long time. Then, he leaned back in his chair and slowly exhaled. "This changes everything," he finally said. I didn't ask for details. I simply told him what I wanted. A new will. A full asset protection review. An immediate revision of my medical proxy, removing Nora's name from everything she had ever touched. I wanted layers. Walls. Traps. If they dared to try again, even indirectly, they would trip every single wire I built. David didn't flinch. He started drafting the paperwork that very same afternoon. That evening, for the first time in weeks, I cooked myself a full dinner. Grilled salmon, roasted asparagus, a glass of white wine I'd been saving since Christmas. I ate slowly, watching the streetlights flicker across my driveway, thinking about how meticulously Nora had planned it all. They didn't want to hurt me for sport, you see. They wanted structure. Control. They didn't even want the money just to spend it. They wanted it to secure a life where I didn't exist. And that, more than any violence, was what I simply couldn't forgive. I called Martha just before 10. Told her I needed her to witness a signing in 2 days. She didn't ask what for. She just said she'd bring lemon bars. The next day, I drove out to the edge of town. There's a retirement community there, not the kind with linoleum floors and peeling paint, but a new kind. A luxury kind. Quiet buildings wrapped around sun-drenched courtyards, the scent of lavender and lemon balm drifting in the air, a small cafe with a fireplace in the corner. I walked the halls alone, introducing myself as a potential volunteer, a music teacher, a neighbor, a friend. I met 3 women in the reading room. They looked exactly like me, just a few years ahead. Sharp minds, clear eyes, empty chairs beside them. I sat with them for 15 minutes, listened to their stories, their routines, their quiet disappointments. They too had been someone's mother. Someone's wife. Someone's bank account. I smiled. I thanked them. I left. On the way home, I took the long route, the one that passed Jake's office. The lights were off. The lot was empty. But his name was still painted on the front window. I parked across the street and just stared at it for a few minutes. Not with hatred. Just with cold, hard calculation. Back home, I filed the draft will David had sent. I reviewed the security footage again, just once. Then I set up a new backup system and emailed copies of everything to a secure storage drive under a new name. I was no longer planning defense. This, my dear, was offense. By the end of that week, the foundation was laid. New legal structures. A firewall between me and every single one of their schemes. But I wasn't done. Oh no. I wrote a letter, a short one, printed it, sealed it, and addressed it to an attorney I hadn't seen in 15 years. A woman named Judith, who specialized in elder abuse litigation. Not because I needed her now, but because I might. Then I went outside and watered my plants. The wind was cool. The sky was dark with a low hum of summer thunder in the distance. Everything smelled like soil and fresh-cut grass. Inside, the cameras kept rolling. The footage kept building. And my strength? It kept growing. Because they had touched the wrong woman. And I had only just begun. By the end of that week, the outer layer of my defense was completely sealed. The legal protections were locked in place. My camera system had recorded enough to speak for itself, should I ever lose my voice. But defense wasn't enough anymore. I wasn't content to simply wait for them to strike again. I was done being the hunted. I had the evidence. Now, it was time to turn the full weight of it against them. My first step wasn't loud. It was just a name on an envelope. I mailed 3 certified packages. One to the state's Adult Protective Services office. One to the ethics committee at Jake's engineering firm. And one to the managing partner of the law firm where Nora used to clerk, a place that prided itself on its sterling legacy and reputation. Each envelope contained the exact same thing, a thumb drive with damning video clips, scans of the forged documents, and a short, calm letter simply stating the dates, times, and cold, hard facts. No accusations. No threats. Just the unvarnished truth, delivered like a block of ice. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. The point wasn't conversation. The point, my dear, was consequence. Next, I booked a quiet lunch at the very country club Nora had been so desperately trying to claw her way into. I reserved a table under my maiden name and arrived early, wearing the beautiful brooch my husband had given me the day we paid off our house. I didn't invite anyone. But I made absolutely sure that the lunch coordinator, the same woman who handled all their gala committees, saw me come in and sit alone. I ordered the trout, tipped in cash, and casually mentioned I was reviewing catering options for a community fundraiser. Then, I left behind a business card I'd had printed just the day before. It listed only my name and the phrase, Community Advocate, Bloom Foundation. No phone number, just a website. That website? It had only one page, a quiet, elegant mission statement, and a video link titled, When Family Fails You. The video was less than 4 minutes long. My face never appeared. It used subtitles over black and white security footage, set to soft piano music. No narration. Just visuals. A woman being handed a document. A man swapping bottles in a kitchen. A slap. A fall. Then, a slow fade to the chilling words, protect yourself before they rewrite your life. It wasn't just about me anymore. I knew that then. I met with Detective Grant again 2 days later. She had received confirmation from the district office. The investigation had been officially upgraded. Not just elder abuse. Now, it included forgery, misuse of protected medical information, and conspiracy to defraud. She asked if I was willing to testify. I told her yes. Without blinking. That night, I slept with my window open. The air smelled like pine needles and distant rain. I woke once, briefly, to the soft clinking of the wind chimes on my porch. I listened, then drifted back to sleep. 2 mornings later, Jake lost his job. I didn't hear it from him. I heard it from Martha, who got a text from her nephew, who worked in the building right next door to Jake's office. Apparently, there'd been a private meeting. Then Jake left the building without his security badge. It only took one look at the footage, you see. The slap. The switch. The falsified document. The firm wanted no part of that liability, especially with state investigators now watching. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I watered my garden that morning like I always did. I trimmed the lavender bush and swept the walkway. But I did allow myself one small, knowing nod when I passed the mailbox. Nora, she held out longer. She always had more insulation. She'd always been better at pretending. But the cracks started showing, fast. Her name disappeared from the social calendar. At the club. Her volunteer slot at the Historic Preservation Board was quietly reassigned. And when I walked past the fancy boutique she used to frequent, the manager wouldn't meet my eyes. The next day, I received a message through my lawyer from hers. She requested a private meeting. Not about custody. Not about inheritance. About closure. I told David to politely decline. There would be no private meetings. No quiet arrangements. If she wanted to speak, she could do so under oath. The hardest part of those weeks wasn't the damage. It wasn't watching the reputation they'd so carefully built collapse under its own weight. It was the terrifying realization of how easily I could have missed it. How agonizingly close I'd come to being erased by the very people I had given my entire life to. It made me see everything differently. I spent that weekend cleaning out my attic. I found old photo albums I hadn't touched in years. Letters from my late husband. Birthday cards from when Emily was just a toddler. I boxed them carefully and moved them into my study, into the cabinet where I now kept my legal files and backup drives. The past and the future, side by side. On Sunday, I made a small, anonymous donation in Nora's name to the local women's shelter. Just a check. No message. Not out of forgiveness or guilt. But because sometimes, even when people try to destroy you, you don't have to let them change who you are. I was Harriet Bloom, and I still was. And the storm I had unleashed. It was only just beginning. It didn't take long for the blowback to begin. When people start to fall, they rarely go quietly, do they? And Nora. She was absolutely not one to go down without a desperate struggle. 3 days after Jake lost his job, I started noticing a car parked across the street from my house. Same make and model, but the plates changed every single day. No one ever got out. They never rang my bell. But the engine purred for hours, always facing my front window, always around the same time Nora used to drop off her fake baked goods. I didn't panic. I just added one more angle to my security system and went about my day. But I knew. It was her, or someone hired by her. Watching. Waiting. Looking for any sign of weakness. That same week, a letter arrived in the mail. Not from her directly, of course. This one was from a different law firm, one I didn't recognize. The tone was sharp, aggressive, practically spitting accusations. It claimed I was falsifying claims, manipulating video evidence, and maliciously damaging Nora and Jake's reputation. They threatened defamation lawsuits, a formal countersuit for slander, and financial restitution. I calmly handed the letter to David Kessler, and went to make a pot of Earl Grey tea. He read it while I clipped fresh basil from my garden. He looked up once, gave a small nod, and simply said he'd handle it. He asked if I had updated backups of all the original files. Yes, I told him. 3 copies. One on a drive in my fireproof lockbox, one with Martha, and one in a safety deposit box at the credit union. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and reread the original forged documents. Nora hadn't just tried to trick me. She had meticulously used legal formatting, my old signature lifted from tax returns, even a mock notary stamp she must have pulled from some online template. She knew exactly what she was doing. And now that the law had seen the evidence, she was scrambling, throwing desperate darts at the wall, hoping something, anything, would stick. The phone rang. A woman introduced herself as an investigator from the State Board for Medical Licensing. She had received a copy of the footage and was pursuing a formal disciplinary review against the physician who had signed that initial elder care assessment, the one Nora had used to justify seizing medical power of attorney. Apparently, he'd signed off without ever even meeting me in person. Never called me. just took Nora's word and rubber-stamped it. I thanked her. After the call ended, I sat still for a long, long time. That doctor, a man I'd never seen, had come that close to declaring me legally incompetent. If things had gone just a little differently, I could have been locked away in a facility right now, forgotten, drifting, a ghost of myself. He was a complete stranger, yet his sheer carelessness had nearly stolen everything from me. And Nora, she knew it. She counted on it. I wrote his name down and filed it with the rest. Not because I wanted revenge, no. But because I wanted a meticulous record. A full, clear map of just how agonizingly close I'd come to being erased. Later that week, Nora tried something bolder. I came home from the pharmacy to find my gate open. Nothing looked touched at first glance. But when I entered the kitchen, I noticed my spice drawer was slightly ajar. And one of the labels on my chamomile tea jar was peeled back. There was a tiny, telltale fingerprint in ink, just barely visible when I held it against the light. I didn't drink the tea. I called Detective Grant instead. She arrived that evening with a quiet team. No flashing lights, no blaring sirens. They took samples, photographed the scene, and asked if I'd eaten or drunk anything I hadn't prepared myself. I said no. She nodded, then placed a small recorder on my counter. Speak freely, just in case, she advised. I didn't feel afraid. I felt a core of pure steel growing in my chest. 2 days later, she confirmed it. A sedative had been laced into the chamomile. The same compound they tried to switch my medication with. The same dosage. The same manufacturer. They hadn't given up. They had escalated. It was desperation, plain and simple. But desperation, darling, makes people careless. On Saturday morning, I received a call from a woman named Deborah. She said she'd seen the video. Her daughter had forwarded it to her after it made its way through a private Facebook group for local caregivers. Deborah's own mother had lost her house 6 months earlier under terrifyingly similar circumstances. No footage, no proof, just paperwork and manipulation. She wanted to thank me, said she was speaking to a lawyer now. I hung up and stared out the window for a long time. Maybe what happened to me wasn't just about my family. Maybe it was something much wider. A quiet epidemic, hiding behind polite dinners and fake smiles. And maybe exposing Nora would do more than just clear my name. Maybe it would protect someone else. The next week, I walked into the courthouse. Financial exploitation. Attempted poisoning. Fraud. Conspiracy to commit identity theft. I didn't want money. I wanted the record. The public declaration. I wanted it written into the public file that what they did was real. That I had not imagined it. That I had not exaggerated. That I mattered. That week, Nora's attorney dropped her. Jake's former employer released a scathing public statement, distancing themselves from any former employee involved in investigations of elder abuse. And a week later, the district attorney's office requested a meeting. They had questions. And I, my dear, had answers. It was a Monday morning when the official letter arrived. A summons. The state had decided to proceed with charges. No longer just a civil case. This was criminal court, formal, structured, and very, very public. I read it in full, then placed it deliberately on the kitchen counter beside my folded dish towel. The light streaming through the blinds striped the page like prison bars. I thought about that for a long time. Later that afternoon, David called to confirm the schedule. I would give a statement. I would appear in court. But before any of that, there would be a recorded mediation. A chance, they said, for the parties to clarify intentions, to settle, to look one another in the eye. I agreed. Not because I believed for a second Nora would apologize. But because I had one last, crucial thing to say. The meeting took place in a neutral building downtown, 3 floors up, in a stark, gray room with no windows. Just a round table, 2 chairs on each side, a silent camera in the corner, and a pitcher of water no one touched. She walked in first. Tailored jacket. Hair pulled back tight. Not a single wrinkle on her blouse. But I saw it immediately, in the rigid set of her jaw, the haunted look in her eyes. She looked brittle, like glass stretched too thin. One sharp tap from the inside, and she might shatter. Jake wasn't there. Her lawyer followed, tall and silent. Mine was already seated. I didn't stand. When she sat down across from me, our eyes finally met. She blinked first. The mediator introduced himself, laying out the rules. I barely heard him. My focus was entirely on her hands. Perfect nails, one tapping a slow, nervous rhythm against the armrest. She used to tap like that during her math tests as a little girl. They asked if I wanted to begin. Yes, I said. I looked her straight in the eye. I told Nora that I had raised her to be strong, that I had sacrificed more than she could ever possibly know to give her a safe, stable life. I told her I had never needed thanks, but I had absolutely expected decency. I told her the hardest part wasn't the betrayal. Not the forged documents. Not the fall in my kitchen, or the altered medicine. It was the crushing fact that when she looked at me, she no longer saw a person. Just a hurdle. An obstacle between her and a comfortable life. She didn't interrupt. She didn't speak a single word. So, I kept going. I told her I knew what fear was now. That I had spent nights wide awake, unable to sleep, wondering if the tea I drank would be the one to finally make me forget my own name. That I had meticulously counted pills, measured labels, checked locks twice over. I told her I had never lived like that before. Not until her. When I finally stopped speaking, the room was utterly quiet. Even the mediator didn't move. Then her lawyer cleared his throat and said his client had a statement prepared. Nora reached into her folder and pulled out a piece of paper, but she didn't read from it. She just held it. She said she never wanted things to go this far. That Jake had pushed. That after her second miscarriage, she felt utterly alone, unmoored. That watching me live alone in that house, independent and proud, made her feel invisible, like her life had stalled while mine kept going. She said she didn't mean to hurt me, that she thought she was protecting me, that Jake had told her no one would believe me anyway. I listened. I believed some of it. But not enough. When she finished, she folded the paper and placed it back in her bag. She looked down. Not at the table. Not at me. Just down. I leaned forward and told her something I hadn't planned to say. That there had been a time, not so long ago, when I had almost left everything to her. Not because she had earned it, but because I thought love required sacrifice. That maybe giving her everything would finally heal whatever wound lived inside her. But then she tried to erase me. And I simply would not give anything to someone who believed I was disposable. The mediator, ever so gently, asked if we were willing to resolve the matter outside of court. David, my lawyer, said no. Nora's lawyer didn't even argue. When it was over, she stood slowly. I stayed seated. She walked to the door, hesitated, then turned to look back at me. She said my name, just once. Harriet. And I said hers, the way I used to, Nora Jean. Then she left. I sat in that quiet room for another 10 minutes, just listening to the hum of the air vent. Outside, the light had shifted, clouds gathering in the sky. I walked to my car alone and drove to the cemetery where my husband was buried. I didn't speak to his headstone. I just sat on the bench beside it and let the wind blow across my face. I had thought that facing her would bring me peace. But peace wasn't what I felt. It was something else. Something quieter. Like a deep, resonant shift inside my very bones. The moment you stop fighting so hard to be heard, and start choosing who truly deserves to hear you. Back at home, the house felt heavier. Not darker, no, just fuller somehow. I made soup. I turned on the porch light early. I pulled the spare quilt from the closet and left it folded at the end of my bed. There was a storm forecast for the weekend. I wasn't worried. I had weathered far worse. And I wasn't alone anymore. The wheels of justice were truly moving now. I could feel it. Slow. Deliberate. But absolutely unstoppable. Nora would finally face what she had done. And I would face what came next. Not with fear, but with an absolute, unwavering clarity. Because I knew who I was. And no one, not even my own daughter, could ever take that from me again. It began with a knock at their door. Not loud, not rushed, just 3 steady knocks around 7:15 in the morning. The neighbors were still pulling on coats, sipping their first coffee. Jake, half-shaved, wearing one sock, opened the door, his phone clutched like a shield. A tall man in a navy blazer introduced himself as Deputy Marshal Whitman and handed over a thick envelope. Jake didn't even read it right away. His eyes went straight to the glint of the gold badge on the marshal's hip. By the time he finished scanning the document, Nora had come downstairs, her hair still damp from the shower. She took one look at Jake's ashen face and froze. Then, she turned to the marshal, her voice tight. Does this mean we have to appear? The marshal didn't answer her. He simply turned and left. Inside that envelope was so much more than just a court summons. It was the official beginning of a full-scale investigation. Financial records frozen. Access to accounts restricted. The DA's office had reviewed all the footage and the medical records, authorizing a joint task force to pursue the charges. That very same afternoon, an investigator visited the hospital where the sedative prescription originated. Interviews followed. Paper trails were meticulously uncovered. The doctor who had signed the order, the one who'd never even met me. He claimed he'd been misled by a third party and failed to verify the patient's identity. His license was suspended within days. By Friday, Jake's name was quietly removed from the school board committee he'd been so proud of. And Nora's nonprofit, once the subject of a glowing, full-page feature in the community paper, was quietly taken off the city's partnership list. I didn't gloat, no. But I also didn't look away. I watched their fall with the same quiet precision I used to plant tomatoes in the spring. Patient. Intentional. At the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering near the produce aisle. Nora's name. One of them slowly shook her head, clutching a bag of lemons. The ripple had begun. Meanwhile, I just kept living. I attended my book club. Returned borrowed Pyrex dishes. Mailed birthday cards to the women I'd met at the grief support group. But I never stopped tracking the legal steps. Every form, every filing, every update from David came with a calm clarity that reminded me exactly why I had chosen to act. This wasn't just about what they tried to do to me anymore. It was about creating a line they could no longer, ever cross. One night, I got a low, urgent call. Jake had been spotted at a bar near the interstate. Loud. Slurring. Talking way too much. According to the bartender, he'd mentioned lawsuits and something about a safe deposit box. I didn't react with panic. I simply walked into my bedroom, opened my second drawer, and removed a document I'd kept tucked beneath the quilted stationery. An old insurance file that had nothing to do with them, but shared the same bank branch listed on one of Nora's forged documents. A day later, I authorized David to request the bank's internal security footage, citing fraud. They complied. What we uncovered was absolutely staggering. Nora had visited that branch 3 weeks before my supposed signature had shown up on the care transfer papers. She hadn't come alone. She'd brought a man who, from behind, looked enough like me to pass on a grainy camera feed. They had approached a notary together. The notary, young and clearly distracted, had stamped a document without properly checking identification. It was all there. Dated. Logged. Another brick in the wall. When David presented the footage to the assistant district attorney, her eyes narrowed. The case shifted. What began as a gut-wrenching family betrayal now expanded into felony territory: theft, forgery, medical fraud, attempted elder abuse. And then, the truly unexpected happened. Jake flipped. Faced with mounting charges and the very real threat of jail time, he turned on Nora. He signed a deposition. Gave a full account of her meticulous role, how she had orchestrated the pill swap, how she had instructed him to download fake legal templates, how she had coached him on precisely which words to use when talking to the doctor. His confession came with details only someone inside the plan could possibly know. He even provided screenshots of their old texts. The DA's office didn't really need more, but they took it all anyway. I sat with David the morning we received the news. Nora would be indicted. A formal arrest. It was a heavy thing, hearing it out loud. And yet, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like an exhale. I remembered the way she used to braid her doll's hair at the foot of my bed when she couldn't sleep. How she once cried when I missed her piano recital because I had to work a double shift at the diner. Somewhere along the way, something had hardened in her. And now, the world was about to show her what it truly meant to be held accountable. The next day, Martha brought over lemon bars. She didn't say anything. Just placed the tin on my counter and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. I sat with that tin for a long time before opening it. I wasn't celebrating. But I also wasn't grieving. The truth had come into the light. And once truth begins to shine, darling, it's very hard to put it back into the dark. 2 days after Jake's confession hit the DA's desk, Nora, through her attorney, filed an emergency motion. It was slick, full of legal jargon, designed to freeze all evidence connected to her nonprofit's accounts. She claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that she was the innocent victim of a malicious smear campaign orchestrated by a bitter parent and an unstable husband. The court, bless its heart, rejected it. But the media. Oh, the media did not. The local paper ran a headline too big for its column: "Respected youth advocate faces allegations of fraud and elder abuse." Her face was plastered right beneath it, a smiling photo taken at some fundraising event, surrounded by school children. The comment section exploded. Some defended her, citing years of service. Others screamed for her arrest. But the most damning tones came from former staff. Anonymous quotes. Quiet, chilling accusations. They spoke of missing funds, strange reimbursements, donors suddenly pulling back. And just like that, the storm she'd so desperately tried to hide behind finally swallowed her whole. At home, I remained quiet. I didn't call anyone back. I didn't respond to the handful of people who left messages, saying they were sorry and had no idea. I didn't need their sympathy. I needed clarity. David met me at the diner down on Oak the following morning. He slid into the booth across from me, opened a slim manila folder, and showed me the latest deposition. It wasn't just Jake anymore. One of Nora's former assistants had bravely stepped forward. She confirmed Nora had systematically used the nonprofit's funds to cover personal expenses and had even drafted false meeting notes to justify fraudulent grant spending. Each line of testimony was like a rope pulling back a heavy curtain, revealing the ugliness beneath. But I felt no joy. No satisfaction. Only a growing, profound heaviness. That afternoon, I sat by the window with a cup of lukewarm tea, watching the wind lift the corners of my garden tarp. I remembered planting flowers with Nora when she was just a child. She had such soft hands, and a boundless curiosity. She once asked if daisies could hear us when we spoke to them. Somewhere, between that vibrant summer and this bleak winter, something inside her had turned stone cold. The next day, a letter arrived. Not official. Not legal. Just a plain white envelope with shaky, familiar handwriting. It was from Emily. She wrote that she had moved in with a friend's family, said she couldn't be near her parents right now. Said she had seen the footage. Read the headlines. She didn't ask to come visit me. She didn't offer any apologies on her mother's behalf. She simply wrote, "I believe you and I'm sorry." I sat with that letter in my lap for a long, long time. Not crying. Just breathing. That night, I locked every single door. The next morning, a frantic pounding shook my back door. I stood absolutely still, holding my breath, my heart steady as a rock. It was Nora. She looked thinner. Her eyes were wild. Her hair pulled into a frantic, loose knot, like she hadn't slept in days. I didn't open the door. She shouted my name twice, screamed that she just needed to talk, that it had all gone too far. I turned away from the window and walked into the living room. I didn't want to hear it. But then I heard glass shatter. The sound of a flower pot breaking into 100 pieces. By the time I reached the porch, she was gone. And there, beside the broken clay, was a photograph. It was the one from our trip to Savannah, the very last trip we ever took as mother and daughter. I picked it up. The corner was torn. Her smile in the picture looked forced, even then. 2 nights later, a letter came from her attorney. A thinly veiled threat, demanding the withdrawal of all charges, claiming emotional coercion. David advised me not to respond. The DA's office sent a formal rejection. But I knew what this was. It wasn't a legal play. It was personal. She wanted me to feel something. Regret. Guilt. Doubt. Instead, I felt only more steel. I had spent too many years wondering what I did wrong. I would not spend another second apologizing for simply surviving what she tried to do to me. The next Sunday, I sat at church. Not for the sermon, just for the quiet stillness. Martha joined me, sitting silently by my side. After the service, she handed me a small, wrapped package. Inside was a photo frame. She'd taken a screenshot of me from the news clip. The moment where I walked out of the courthouse, head high, spine straight. She said, "You should see yourself the way we all saw you that day." I thanked her. That night, I placed the frame beside my dresser mirror. Not as a trophy. Not as a warning. But as a stark reminder that sometimes, survival is quiet. Sometimes it doesn't shout or break. Sometimes, my dear, it just stands. And I had stood through all of it. The envelope came on a Thursday morning, hand-delivered by David, who offered a tired smile and a steady hand. He didn't sit. He just stood there, watching me open it at the kitchen table. I unfolded the letter, reading the 2 short lines printed in elegant font. It was an invitation. Nora and Jake were hosting a family appreciation dinner at their country club. No signatures. No handwritten note. No apology. Just the audacious presumption that I, of all people, would show up. David waited for my reaction. His arms crossed lightly, as if he already knew exactly what I was going to say. I set the letter down without a word. I stood, walked to the cabinet near the stairs, and pulled out the navy blue folder I had kept sealed since that morning after the police raid. Inside were copies of all the security footage, transcripts of Nora's chilling conversations, detailed testimonies, a full record of the forged prescriptions, the murky slush funds, and even the signed waiver where Jake finally admitted to the sedative swap. I handed the folder to David. "It's time," I said. He nodded once. And left. No discussion. No explanation needed. Saturday night arrived. The country club's parking lot glowed under golden lights. Expensive cars lined the front, a parade of luxury. A young valet took mine without even blinking when I pulled up in my dusty station wagon. Inside, the space buzzed with polite laughter, the clinking of wine glasses, and shallow, meaningless conversations. I hadn't been to an event like this in years. But I wasn't here for nostalgia. A woman with a clipboard ushered me to my seat. I was alone at a table near the stage. Everyone else sat in clusters, 4 or 5 to a table, some whispering as they noticed my solitary presence. I didn't return any greetings. Then Nora walked out onto the small stage, her hair curled tightly, lips painted with something a shade too red for her usual taste. She took the microphone with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to applause. She spoke of legacy, of family, of giving back. Jake stood stiffly beside her, nodding like a bobblehead. And just as she reached the part about honoring the women who raised us, the ballroom doors swung open. 2 plainclothed officers stepped inside. They didn't shout. They didn't rush. They moved with the calm, unwavering certainty of people who knew exactly what they were walking into. One approached Jake. The other walked straight to Nora. It all happened so fast that most guests didn't even register what was truly happening until the cold, metallic click of the bracelets echoed through the room. A ripple of confusion. Gasps. A few shrieks. Nora's voice cracked. What is this? Jake's face turned a shade I can only describe as utterly empty. The officers didn't explain a thing to the stunned crowd. They simply led them out, quietly, firmly, through the side doors. I remained seated. I didn't need to follow. I had already seen this scene play out in my mind a dozen times. But then something happened. Emily. She walked out from the back of the room. She had been hiding behind the curtain, near the service entrance. She didn't look at me. She just stood there, watching her parents being escorted away. She didn't cry. She didn't run after them. Instead, she turned to the stunned, silent crowd and said, her voice clear and strong, "My grandmother saved me." Then, she walked directly towards me and sat down at my table. Silence settled over the room like a heavy, suffocating fog. No one clapped. No one whispered. Just profound, absolute silence. 2 days later, I signed the final set of papers at David's office. The trust was officially transferred. My lottery winnings, minus what I kept to live comfortably, were now safely in the name of the Franklin Fund, a nonprofit I created in honor of my own mother. Its mission was simple, yet profound, to provide legal and emotional support to elderly individuals facing the devastating abuse, neglect, or coercion from their own families. I didn't need the recognition. I didn't need a plaque. But when the very first call came through, from a woman named Sylvia, who had been locked out of her own home after signing over her pension, I knew. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had made the right choice. Later that month, I sat with Martha on the porch. She asked me, gently, "Do you feel better?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked out at my garden. The daffodils were blooming again, darling. The very same ones Nora had planted with her tiny hands so many years ago. I no longer needed to understand what went wrong. I simply needed to know I had done what was right. The hallway outside the visitation room reeked of antiseptic and artificial lemon. Somewhere down the corridor, a cart rolled by with a soft, lonely squeak. I sat on the bench, a flimsy paper visitor tag clipped to my sweater. It was the same sweater I'd worn the day Nora turned 10. The same one she once wrapped herself in after scraping her knee on the driveway, saying it smelled like home. The officer opened the door and gave me a short, almost imperceptible nod. I stood and stepped inside. The room was quiet. Sterile. Pale blue walls. A single table, bolted to the floor, 2 chairs on either side. One chair was already occupied. Nora sat stiffly, her posture tight, her eyes utterly unreadable. Her hands rested on the table, fingers laced together. She didn't look up when I entered. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat. No words. Not yet. The silence between us wasn't hostile. It wasn't forgiving either. It was a silence that belonged to 2 people who had, at long last, run out of excuses. Her eyes finally lifted. Not angry. Not broken. Just tired. "I didn't think you'd come," she murmured. I nodded slowly. I did. She waited. Maybe for an accusation. Maybe, impossibly, for comfort. I gave her neither. "You planned the dinner weeks before you sent that invitation," I said evenly, my voice calm. "You wanted me surrounded. Outnumbered. Pressured. She blinked, but didn't deny it. You expected me to fold. To sign over the trust. To disappear quietly. Nora's lips pressed into a thin, white line. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. It wasn't about the money. I let that sit in the air for a moment. Then I leaned forward slightly. Then what was it about? She glanced at the pale blue wall, then back to me, her gaze flickering. You always made me feel like I had to be perfect, like everything I did was a performance. You praised me for grades, for achievements, for being strong. But never for just being me. I exhaled. Not because it hurt, but because it was something I had waited years, decades, to hear. You're right, I said. I was hard on you. I wanted you to be capable, independent, safe in a world that wouldn't hand you anything. I didn't know how to love gently. Her shoulders dropped ever so slightly. So I turned hard, too. I married someone like Jake because he knew how to play strong. But we were just two people trying to stay ahead of the fear. I know, I said, and I let that go on for far too long. She looked down at her hands, nervously picking at her thumbnail. I didn't mean to hurt you that night with the pills. With what I said. You didn't mean it, I said, my voice steady, but you let it happen. And you kept letting it happen. She didn't answer. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my coat pocket and laid it on the table between us. Her name was typed at the top. It was a handwritten letter. Not mine. Emily's. I had found it tucked under my door the night before. Nora hesitated before picking it up. Her eyes moved quickly down the page. I watched her face shift. Confusion, then something close to raw shame. She's been seeing a therapist, I said softly. She wrote that on her own. Said she wants to see you, but not until you've done the work. Nora folded the letter again, carefully, like it was something fragile, something precious. I don't know if I can fix this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You don't have to fix it all today, I said. But you do have to begin. For the first time since I walked in, her eyes met mine with something that truly resembled the girl she used to be. The girl who built forts in the backyard. The girl who begged for midnight pancakes. The girl who once cried, her heart breaking, because a bird had flown into our window and died. I stood slowly. I'm not here to punish you, Nora. The court will do that part. I came because you're still my daughter, and because I needed to say this, face to face. She nodded once, stiff and small. I moved to the door, just before I knocked for the guard. I turned back. I forgive you, I said. She didn't say anything, but her lips trembled. And as the door opened behind me, I saw her clutching Emily's letter like it was the only real thing left in that sterile room. I stepped into the cold air outside. The wind was sharp, but it felt clean. Martha was waiting in the car, reading a book, her glasses pushed halfway down her nose. She didn't ask how it went. She just offered me a thermos of hot tea and turned on the heater. We drove in silence for a while, the city slowly unfolding into the distance. At a stoplight, I looked over at her. Do you think she meant it? Martha didn't answer immediately. Then she said, her voice thoughtful, sometimes, Harriet, the first sorry is the one they say to themselves. I watched the traffic move past us. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel hollow either. I felt done. Not with being a mother. Not with being hurt. But with carrying it all alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. It was quiet in the house again. Not the kind of oppressive silence that once pressed heavy against my chest. Not the silence that came with waiting for footsteps that never arrived, or phone calls that always carried an expectation, never just love. No. This was a new kind of quiet. A gentle one. A silence with true space to breathe. I had started waking up without that familiar knot in my stomach. It didn't happen all at once, you see. It crept in day by day, as I cleared the clutter from my kitchen, as I replaced the old curtains in the living room, as I planted marigolds by the porch and watched them bloom. There was a profound peace in the doing. Some mornings, I'd sit out with a cup of tea, wrapped in the same shawl I'd worn on Emily's first day of kindergarten. That morning felt like another lifetime ago, but the warmth in my chest as I remembered her tiny hand waving from the school bus window. That warmth stayed with me. Emily hadn't come to visit yet, but she called. Not every day, but enough. Her voice was soft, sometimes uncertain, like she didn't quite know how to talk to me without Nora translating. But it was her. And that, for now, was more than enough. She told me she was writing short stories now, mostly about animals that could talk. She said one was based on a grandmother fox who lived in a cave full of books and could see people's thoughts. I asked her if that fox ever got lonely. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Not really." Because the fox had learned to enjoy her own company. I smiled at that. Martha had become more than just a neighbor. She had become a soothing rhythm in my week. Tuesday morning walks. Friday lunches at the corner cafe. Sunday evenings watching the old black and white movies I never had time for before. One afternoon, I helped her repaint the fence around her vegetable garden. We didn't talk much that day, just the gentle sound of the brush moving along the wood, the occasional scrape of a chair, the sun climbing across our backs. It was ordinary. But it was the kind of ordinary I had once thought was gone for good. I had also started volunteering at the small thrift bookstore downtown, just a few hours a week. Mostly sorting donations, sometimes helping older customers find large print titles. The first time I walked through the back door, the scent of old paper and dust settled over me like a comforting quilt. I hadn't realized how much I missed being useful, in a space that wasn't tied to survival. There was a woman there, named Judith, in her late 60s. Sharp-witted, and always wearing earrings the size of walnuts. She didn't pry. She just welcomed me with a kind of unspoken knowing. We didn't talk about our pasts, but somehow, we understood each other. And that was a kind of intimacy I hadn't had in years. One evening, as we were closing up, she handed me a slim book of poetry. Said it reminded her of me. I took it home and read the whole thing in one sitting. One line stayed with me, resonating longer than the rest. Some wounds don't close because they were never meant to. They grow into doors. That night, I didn't cry. But I sat up in bed, hand on my chest, breathing slow and deep. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was remembering. And that was a different kind of ache, one I could finally live with. I didn't miss Nora the way I thought I would. I missed the idea of her. The version of her that existed when she was 7 and tried to make pancakes for my birthday, burning every single one. I missed the sound of her laugh when she read silly books out loud. But the woman she had become had no place in my life now. At least not yet. Maybe not ever. And that was okay. Because for the first time in a very, very long time, I wasn't waiting. I wasn't planning escape routes in my own home. I wasn't second-guessing the names of pills or locking away papers in hidden drawers. I was just living. Fully. Quietly. Steadily. There was still work to be done on myself, on what I wanted the rest of my years to look like. But I was no longer running from the question. I was walking straight into it. And the path, while unfamiliar, didn't scare me anymore. I stood by the lake that morning, letting the sun kiss the back of my neck. The same lake I used to bring Emily to when she was little, back when her giggles could echo off the water, and I believed family was something solid, unshakable. Now, the lake felt like mine again. The breeze carried the scent of pine and something faintly sweet. Maybe the lilacs that had bloomed early this year. It reminded me that life always kept growing, even after winter had had its way. 2 weeks had passed since the final court date. Nora had pleaded guilty to elder abuse, fraud, and attempted coercion. Her sentence wasn't long, but the damage to her public image was swift and absolute. Her company dropped her. Her name had been quietly removed from 2 nonprofit boards. There was no speech from her. No apology. Only silence. Jake took a different route. His family had hired a lawyer who begged for leniency, citing stress, poor judgment, temporary mental strain. It didn't help. He faced charges, too, though less severe. But his medical license was suspended. His future, utterly uncertain. And that was enough for me. I never wanted to destroy them. I just wanted them to stop destroying me. The estate was officially transferred back to my name. The house. The land. Every single document Nora had tried to reroute behind my back. All of it was mine again. Legally. And visibly. But I didn't celebrate with champagne or parties. I simply took a long walk around the property, touched the old maple tree by the gate, and let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was still holding. The cameras had been removed from my home. Not because I was no longer cautious, but because I no longer felt watched. I no longer lived in fear of the knock on the door, or the smile that came with too much sweetness and far too many strings attached. Martha visited more often. She brought banana bread this time, still warm. We sat in my kitchen, not saying much. Just 2 women who had seen enough of life to know when silence simply meant comfort. Emily started sending letters. Handwritten ones. She said she liked the feel of pen on paper better than a screen. Sometimes she included little sketches, a fox in glasses, a cup of tea with steam hearts. I kept them all in a small wooden box on my nightstand. I hadn't replied yet. I wasn't ready. But each envelope brought something tender back into my chest. A warmth I hadn't expected to feel again. And I knew, eventually, I would write her back. There's a kind of healing that doesn't announce itself with fanfare. No grand moments, just quiet evidence. I noticed it when I laughed at an old sitcom rerun. When I found myself humming while folding laundry. When I bought a new scarf simply because I liked the color, not because I needed it. That was the real victory. Not the court ruling. Not the reclaimed house. But the slow, beautiful return of joy in the small, unexpected places. One evening, I took out the winning lottery ticket. I hadn't told anyone about it. Not even Martha. Not even Emily. I'd kept it in a small ceramic jar behind my bookshelf. I didn't need the money anymore to feel safe. But I had plans for it now. The following week, I opened a fund in honor of my mother, a woman who had raised 4 children on a factory wage and still managed to read me bedtime stories every night. The fund would support single women over 60, pursuing community education, starting small businesses, or simply learning how to rebuild a life alone. I named it the Second Bloom Fund, because that's truly what this season of my life had become for me. A second bloom. On the morning of the launch, I wore a navy blue dress and pinned a small silver brooch to the collar. It had belonged to my grandmother. The auditorium wasn't full, but it didn't need to be. The right people were there. Women with soft eyes and strong backs. Women who nodded slowly when I spoke. Women who understood. When I stepped off the stage, I didn't look for Nora in the crowd. I didn't need to. This moment wasn't about her. It was about me. About what I had survived. About what I was still becoming. That night, as I settled into bed, the wind picked up outside. The trees whispered against my windows like an old friend. I reached over and turned off the lamp, then lay in the dark with a steady heartbeat and a quiet mind. I was no longer someone's mother. No longer someone's victim. I was just me. And that, my dear, was more than enough. If you've ever felt quietly erased by the people you once trusted most, I hope this story gave you a sense of clarity and power. Sometimes justice doesn't come through shouting, but through planning, patience, and knowing your worth. If you've ever felt unseen, I see you. And if you've ever found the courage to rebuild after betrayal, I honor you. Share your story, even if it's just in your heart. Healing starts with truth. Thanks for watching. Take care. Good luck.